Hi, and welcome back to This Week in Voice, Season 7, Episode 7. My name is Bradley Metrock, CEO of Project Voice. We've got a great panel today and some really interesting stories. We're going to get to all of that. I want to talk about one thing very quickly at the top. Last week, we rolled out an episode of This Week in Voice in which I rolled through all approximately 200 women who we named as our Women Leaders of Conversational AI class of 2023. That has gone all over the place. There's been Medium posts about it. There's been all sorts of stuff about it. We're gratified by that. We're starting to hear of women that are using this in a hiring context or a promotion context. That's all the desired effect. So good stuff is happening with that. I'll probably have more to say about that at a later time. But I wanted to sort of touch on that here at the top of the show. So we're going to get rolling. We got a fantastic group of folks. Martine, I'm going to start with you from WellSaid Labs. Tell us who you are. Tell us who you're with, and tell us what you do.
Thank you, Bradley. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon if you're watching later today. My name is Martine Ramirez. I am the Chief Revenue Officer at WellSaid Labs. We started back in 2019 at the PolyAI Institute here in Seattle, and we create lifelike synthetic voices out of the voices of real people. We work with companies all over the spectrum of industries. You have individuals in the healthcare industry all the way to the advertising world. We're making sure that we are helping these companies and individuals create and publish stories with voices that are worth listening to. And Bradley, on your note, around the efforts with women in voice, our team is extremely excited about the opportunity. Our core technology, our ethics department, all of those functions in our company at WellSaid Labs are built by very thoughtful, very smart women who are pushing forward the composite of the DNA of teams, building these front-end technologies that are changing the way people think about storytelling, the way people think about AI, and the way people think about this creative tooling that we have in place. Super excited to be here today, chime in as I can with regards to the articles that we have been presented with, but most importantly, super excited to be part of a community that's looking at that intersection of technology and the arts and how we can use these new tools and services to tell better stories. At the end of the day, that's my main passion. That's what we do here at WellSaid, and I'm super excited for the conversation today.
Martine, it's great to have you, and great to have WellSaid Labs and part of it. Long time coming. Thanks for being here. Next up, we got Mark Fosdike from Datch. Mark, say hello.
Hi. Thanks, Bradley. Pleasure to be here. So yeah, I'm Mark. I'm a CEO, co-founder here at Datch. We've been around for about 4 years. 4 years now. Feels like 10. And we're a Series A company. In the voice AI space. So Datch is an AI interface for industrial applications. So we work in verticals such as mining, manufacturing, utilities and energy, a little bit in aerospace as well. And one of the big frustrations that you'll see across the industry is this incredible amount of time and energy spent on these frontline workflows. So with Datch, these workers use voice and NLP to interact with these systems of record supernaturally, really naturally, and it really simplifies that experience for them. And there's some really big benefits for the enterprises as well. So it's been a very interesting journey so far. It's super exciting to be in this space, and glad to be on the podcast.
Thank you for being here. Yeah, Datch is real interesting, and kudos to what you built. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Shridhar Marri from Senseforth.ai. Shridhar, as always, tell me not if, but how I'm messing your name up, and thank you for being here. Tell us all about Senseforth and what y'all do.
All right, thank you so much for having me. My name is Shridhar, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Senseforth.ai. Senseforth is a natural language processing engine that can read large amounts of unstructured data, both in text and voice, and derive meaningful insights. We can use those insights, again, in automating several human-intensive operations across customer acquisition, customer engagement, and customer support. We work with large enterprises around the world. We ranked number 6 in the Squad 2.0, which is the Global Machine Reading Comprehension Leaderboard at Stanford University. Great to
Excellent.
be here.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us. Greatly appreciated. And our fourth panelist is Nikola Mrksic. Nikola, you'll have to pronounce it for me, from PolyAI, really interesting company. Nikola, say hello.
Hey, that wasn't a bad try at all. So my name is Nikola Mrksic. Serbian names, they can be tough. I'm the CEO and co-founder of PolyAI. We are an Anglo-American company, started out of the research we did at the University of Cambridge. Since we've grown to, we're a Series B company. We work with companies like FedEx, Marriott, Volkswagen, many others. And, we build on-brand, very human-sounding voice assistants that emulate the best of a company's customer service reps. We're trying to really change the way that people feel about voice assistants. We're using a trust-led dialogue design framework to kind of like either create a good experience or get out of the way really, really quickly. And really good to be on this podcast, listen to it regularly. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Thanks to all four of y'all for being here. Really accomplished, really interesting companies. Grateful for you being here and taking the time. So with that, we're going to get to the news. Story number 1 from VoiceBot. VoiceBot is 6 years old. Here are 6 ways the industry has changed. So this dives into, this covers a lot of ground in a hurry in this piece, and I like stuff like this. It's great to give VoiceBot a shout out. VoiceBot started slightly after a lot of stuff that we did started on the content side, and as a result of that, This Week in Voice, starting from season 1, I believe it's only 2 or 3 episodes of this show where there hasn't been a VoiceBot article as one of our articles. So if that doesn't speak to the relevance of what VoiceBot's covering, I don't know what would. So kudos to Brett and the team for everything that they've done. This has been circulating the rounds online too. Nikola, I'm going to start with you and work backwards from the order that we just went in. And I want to get your thoughts on this piece. There's some conclusions that are drawn here. What in particular stood out to you from what was presented?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a really good article. So I think like all your points are salient. The number 4, I think, is like an obvious one, but it's worth saying, right? Kind of like when this whole field started hot, especially when it comes to voice. You look at 5-6 years ago, and everyone was talking about chat. Everyone was convinced that only the older demographics will continue to use voice, and everyone young will just be chatting. I mean, I have a vested interest in that not being true, right? But it was a bit perplexing. And I think when COVID happened and, contact center volumes grew instead of shrinking, we knew that it's not really the trend or the consumer preference, but it's worth stating, right? I mean, you're kind of saying that, Amazon and Google have a lower profile. I mean, not that they do. I think they did a lot by actually pushing consumer voice assistants out in the market to really give everyone the right to dream about this thing being in the mainstream and being there in 10 rather than in 50 years, because I don't think anyone really disagrees that we'll have like really superhuman voice assistants in 50 years, but I think they did us a great service. But then really now when you think about everything that people here are talking about, the different segments we're focused on, and we've taken off, and I think COVID really helped with that. But yeah, kind of like also justifies your raison d'etre for the website, right? The number 2 is also good about the custom being hot and kind of like the growth of enterprise. I think that that's driving our growth. I think that people have realized that there is no other recourse than smart ways to automate parts of their customer service in particular. Not that there are others. So those 2 stood out to me because they're very, very, very salient for us.
No, that's great. Yeah. And I think you're a perfect person to start with for this story, because, a lot of how the market has, the technological domain has kind of opened up and evolved, has carved out a space and, for not just your existence, but for the investment, flowing into the company and all your growth and so on. Yeah, that's well taken. Shridhar, I'm going to go to you next. What, if anything, stood out from this piece, from the conclusions that Brett has drawn?
But when I read the article, I think there are 3 or 4 flavors which are coming out. One is, of course, the generative aspect of it, and I think mimicking human cognitive abilities and creative abilities is has always been the fascination for humankind, and I think that is happening right now as we see it, and that's a big phenomenon. And the second flavor that I'm seeing is more predictive. Again, humans always want to have the power of predicting the outcomes, and that is the second big trend that I'm seeing. But of course, as a sort of a next frontier for predictive is going to be obviously prescriptive in the face of a certain outcome. I think that will probably come later. And the third biggest trend that I'm seeing is the speed at which things are rapidly evolving. I think by this token, the Moore's law looks really glacial.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree with that. That's well put. And it is moving very quickly, and it's very tough to keep up with. Trust me, I understand that. Mark, I'm going to go to you. Great comments all the way around so far. I want to get your take. What stood out from this piece?
Yeah, there's a few things that stood out for me. I mean, obviously the one that resonated the most was the rise in enterprise use cases. I remember, many years ago, shouting about this while everyone was very focused on the consumer space, and we saw almost nothing in the space that that I came from in my previous career. And it's good to kind of see that recognized. This was actually touched on in the second point there, is that, the difficulty in these enterprise use cases that we find is that solutions really just need to be customizable. Like, you can't go in with a one-size-fits-all solution. And what that means is there's the rise of the platform in many different areas. And so, we're really focused on that on our side, making sure that it's highly customizable, highly adaptable. But the other piece, and again, this is probably very true across the enterprise, is these voice solutions need to be readily integratable, or ready to integrate into these into systems of record and across the system space. So again, ties into the platformification of voice in our case, and probably in many other cases. So it means it's very hard to achieve, but it's if you achieve it, then and you get that adaptability and customization ability across the spectrum, you've got a big market open to you.
Well said. Yeah, and speaking of well said, I didn't do that on purpose. I probably should have thought about that. I'm not that smart. Martine, heard some great comments. Want to get your take. A lot of surface area to this piece. What stood out to you?
Thank you, Bradley. And by the way, you can say well said as often as you have to. The way that I reacted to the article, which I think has some very important realities capture about the industry, I like to think about it in 3 main buckets, right? The first one is the business pragmatics. The second one that I will kind of pepper in will be around the importance of custom, and then give you the flavor of why we think these matter here at WellSaid. So the first one, when we went to market back in 2018, the keyword commercial applicability was very important. And he tied point number 1 and point number 3 with the rise of the enterprise use case, and also building in parallel the iterations that will make our core technology better, giving our team of researchers the ability to map any insights or any discoveries that they were able to do in the lab to applicable and commercially applicable, more importantly, use cases that we could service. And that is the pragmatics of the business. And I'm not in 100% in agreement with what was captured in the article here. Now, The second point around the importance of custom in these bespoke experiences, and I think Mark captures some of these components. Our CEO, Matt Hawking, he said something recently in a forum we were invited by FedEx, where he asked the audience, when we think about your brand, people can visualize, people know what it looks like, but do they know what it sounds like? And the more that we are augmenting and diversifying the interactions with brands and services, there are going to be more inputs, more interfaces, and sound becomes a very important one. Now, on the third bucket, and I'm trying to go fast and be respectful of time here, is the significance, why this matters, right? And one of the things that I think is between the lines in the articles, here at WellSaid, when we're working on creating a custom voice avatar, for example, I like to take a step back and I invite our customer to say, I know you want to describe the pitch, the cadence, the accent, the language of the voice. But what about the listener? What is she doing? What are they doing? What do we want to create an inflection point for? What is the outcome after the interaction? And for example, I have to think about one of our customers, expert patient. Yes, it is amazing to be able to tinker with AI and apply AI for voice synthesis and create these amazing avatars. But when you have customers that are telling you stories about the use cases they enable for their patients, so they have now a more human reminder that at this point, at this day, they have to take a particular medication. That is the why. We are shrinking the distance between digital experiences and people. And that's what I'm very passionate about. And I think the article did a great work at blending all of these realities together and now peppering in the WellSaid perspective why it matters. At the end of the day, we're just helping people interact and better connect with these experiences.
That's great. Yeah, no, it's really interesting to hear all of y'all's responses to this. I think Brett did a really good job sort of summarizing, Martin, as you said, summarizing a lot in a hurry. And, so much has changed. Shridhar, to what you were saying, it's dizzying to try to keep up with. I joke about this. I haven't joked about it this season on the show, but I joke about it routinely, that when I started This Week in Voice, years ago, 2016, whenever it was, I thought, this probably isn't a great name for this. There's not going to be anywhere close to enough news. I'll end up talking about the same story like every week for like a month, and then a new one will come out. Fortunately, that's been wrong. But it's the good news is that it's created a lot of opportunities for companies, and whether it's our hostility toward big tech or just their inability to adapt rapidly enough, the opportunities for independent players have exploded. And there's no better evidence of that than the four of y'all here on the show. We're going to move on to story number 2, and I'm going to read this out loud. This is from TechCrunch. Shutterstock to integrate OpenAI's DALL-E 2 and launch fund for contributor artists. So this was mentioned in Brett's piece, and this is something that I think if you go back to Alexa and Google Assistant, 2017, 18, you never would have dreamed that we'd be sitting here talking about something like this. Shridhar, I'm going to start with you, and then I'm going to go through Nikola and Martin and Mark. Synthetic media is all, the rage in the media, getting a lot of news. What stood out to you about this piece? There's a couple of different parts to it, but what stood out to you, and your thoughts on this rise of synthetic media? I'm
personally super excited, especially with the synthetic media and the generative, technologies. I think it's going to change the face of the humanity forever, right? So I'm fully aligned with the Shutterstock's strategy as well, because I mean, look at the stock photos and how boring they are. In fact, so pretentious most of them are. And I think that is probably going to change. The biggest change is what I would expect from this phenomenon. But I sort of tend to think a little beyond this, and I think the entire entertainment industry is going to change forever. And I think the full-scale AI-generated stories and movies and TV shows and whatnot will certainly emerge in the future. And I think Netflix probably will be the next in line to do a completely AI-generated TV show. And of course, the users are going to be super empowered. Imagine somebody saying, I want to watch a Western movie tonight starring Al Pacino and Tom Hanks with music composed by Pink Floyd or something like that, right? So it can be completely random and so customized and so so personalized for everyone. I think it is that's where it's going to go. And maybe you just want to watch today's news read by Meryl Streep or something like that, right? So people can say that and get those things in real time, right? So that is, I think the whole idea is the entire endless possibilities is what is fascinating. What could be and what would be are the operative words here. I'm personally very excited.
I'm trying to imagine the movie that you just suggested, and that's great. You painted a real clear picture. Nikola, I'm going to go to you. Interesting piece here. What stood out?
This is interesting. I think that I'll try to be mildly contrarian, even though I share Shridhar's excitement. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, right? And you open Microsoft Paint and you take that spray and you spray and you're like, oh my God, this is great. You make one, other, third, and you look at them afterwards, you're like, well, you know what? It's random mush. I'm not really Picasso. I'm not even close, right? And the real thing with that is it's exciting because it's a really powerful assistive tool, right? Its mechanisms are able to do great things as kind of connecting pieces when you have an intent to do something useful or not. Art, maybe it doesn't have to be useful, right? But, I've had long discussions with my chief operating officer, who's less technical than I am, but probably more excited about these things. And, stock images, well, what's the whole market worth, right? Objectively, it's whole worth to us as humanity. Well, frankly, if they didn't exist, my life wouldn't really change much, right? Our marketing team might have to go and take a photo of something instead of, looking for a good stock photo. But that obfuscates the fact that as a tool, it's very powerful and it can let us do a lot of things. I think when you relate it to, say, what we do, you still have to do something useful, right? Say, in terms of and then the next one you have is about language models and stuff, and I think we've got a lot more to say about that, but you still have to have structure inside the madness, right? And I think that while, I myself worked on deep learning as it came into conversational AI, and I can't complain because, we got thousands of citations out of it, we haven't really moved much in terms of the models. We're just making bigger and bigger rockets right now, and then we generate something, we're like, it's great. But I think I've generated over 300-400 things with this model, and only one is something that I thought was mildly interesting and something that a human couldn't do quickly. So I think we have a lot of work to do, right? I think it's great. It's a good building block, but I wouldn't get that excited.
No, I like that. Yeah, for sure. So, I think that we, it's so I deleted my Twitter account entirely last week. I wrote about that also, but for the moment, our business accounts are still there. And I did see a tweet when I was sort of going through and looking at the business accounts. Somebody said, generative AI this, generative AI that, why don't you generate some revenue? I laughed at that. That's basically your point in a nutshell. Martin, I'm going to go to you.
Well, not even just revenue. Let's just do something measurable and useful, right? Because it's very easy to just create hype out of, things that plausibly look interesting.
I agree with that. I also do agree with Shridhar to some extent too, that Shutterstock, stock images are boring, and a lot of times they're just stupid. They're so banal to the point of not being very useful, and this whole thing with AI infused images has the potential to actually totally change that. So it's interesting. It's an interesting balance between the two viewpoints expressed, and I kind of agree with both. Martin, I'm going to go to you. Interesting piece of TechCrunch. What you think?
Yeah, no, and great points by the panel so far, and this one is very interesting for me because I like to fancy myself a creative first, and here at WellSaid we have a lot of creative inclined individuals, and one of the things that I've noticed in the introduction of these generative capabilities is that somehow we are presenting the arts and technology at odds. When I do see technology as an interpretation of art, blended and performed through the sciences, if you will. And that's kind of like getting into the esoteric a little bit. But one of the components that I find missing in this conversation from the article itself is around the implications of the ethics behind this generative technology. If I go, and I'm going to use a very close to my heart example, if I go to one of these random applications and I type draw a Puerto Rican CRO, you might not even know that Puerto Ricans can be chief revenue officers of a venture-backed tech startup. So what are the biases that we're introducing in the creation of these generative art forms, if you will, and how are we considering the ethical considerations? And the reason that I keep bringing the ethics component, going back to 2018 when Matt Hawking and Michael Petrashuk, our co-founders, were just two guys out of the AI2 lab here in Seattle, our pledge for AI for Good goes all the way from the selection of the data sets that we use, the use cases that we allow people to create with, all the way to how we collaborate with our voice actors. When you take everything out from our business model, we are a marketplace. We are a multi-sided business model. The way that we work with our voice talent and the mechanisms that we have in place to properly compensate them for their work, understanding their sensitivities. Our partner here, Sarah Weiss-Weaver, who's the director of ethics for the company, is doing a great job truly understanding what the creator, that human behind the synthetic version of their likeness, cares about, and what are some of the provisions that we have to put in place in order to respect those sensitivities. So again, I think at the end of the day, the outputs are intriguing. I do see some of the iterations and higher fidelity that we can get away with, especially in the stock image world. But I do resonate, Nikola, what you've said resonated a lot, where let's generate some significance. However we quantify that significance, I think that's where the opportunity truly lies. And let's embed in the creation of the systems controls and mechanisms where the humanity of those that get impacted by the creation and consumption of the content matters. So a little bit in between for what I've heard from the previous gentleman, but I think that significance, it's still something that we have a lot of opportunity to go for.
Yeah, no, I think we need people talking about the ethics of this because, there aren't any right now, to put it bluntly. Mark, I'm going to go to you. I want to get your thoughts on this. Super interesting piece. What's your take?
First thing that kind of stood out to me was, I was just fascinated by the business, the business side of the story of, as soon as this tool came out, I'm an avid user of these, of both the OpenAI tool, public tools, and use it on a number of things. But when it came out, I thought, well, that's either the end of Shutterstock, or they're going to have to rush into a deal. And lo and behold, that deal's come through, and it's a matter of necessity for them. Like if they don't jump on the bandwagon, they're done for. What I'm interested in is like why they've gone for a deal with OpenAI on this rather than go with these open source solutions. So something like Stable Diffusion, where they can probably get something of equal quality, but have a lot more ownership of what they're doing. And I think they've probably got many reasons. I haven't really looked into it too deeply, but there's this world is moving very quickly, and it's very easy to create new versions of this. Like the amount of AI progress in the last 6 months alone has been probably more than in the last 3 years. It's really picked up pace, and IP. I guess the defensiveness of the models are very very hard to quantify at the moment. So rushing into a deal with OpenAI might have been we'll see if they live to regret it. But and I think the other thing, again, coming back to the ethics, is just, it sucks for those artists who have been, making money off Shutterstock and similar sites for a long time, going out, doing a lot, putting a lot of hard work into these images, and then these companies come along and they train their data on these specific images and then put these guys out of a job. And it's probably quite a hard pill to swallow, and it's quite ruthless. So I'd be interested to see if, how these artists also join the, if you can't pick them, join them scenario, just Shutterstock has done as well.
Yeah, the compensation piece is important, and it's actually specifically why I chose the TechCrunch version of this story, because most of the other ones did not mention the fund that they were creating for this. Who's to say if the fund is fair, if it's not fair, or anything like that, but at least it's some lip service to the displacement involved. Yeah, no, this is great. The comments are great. It's a real mixed bag of responses to this, and I think that's probably exactly right. It's like, we see you, we're watching this play out, but we're going to need some more information on this. And just one final point, I will say we're going to spend most of our time remaining on the third story. The fourth story we're just going to touch briefly at the end, because we want to, it's definitely related to this. But we covered a story a couple of weeks ago on this show about a fictitious generative podcast created between Joe Rogan, who's alive, and Steve Jobs, who is deceased. And I don't think nearly enough lip service was paid to just how unethical that probably was to create. Leave the dead alone. You know what I'm saying? It's like, so we need rules around all this. But anyway, no, it's great comments, and appreciate you all taking the time. We're going to roll on to story number 3. Because like I said, it's directly related to this. I'm going to read this out loud. This is from Inside Higher Ed. Machines can craft essays. How should writing be taught now? So we have had stories from Inside Higher Ed throughout the life of this show. Really like how they present a lot of issues and sort of how they articulate themselves. Mark, I'm going to start with you, and then Martine, and then Nikola, and then Shridhar for this. This is definitely related to the previous story in several ways. What stood out to you?
I have a lot of thoughts on this one. It's a very interesting potential set of dilemmas. I'm not saying it's a problem yet, but firstly, I don't think it will rise to be a major issue. I think if for example, just like plagiarism, it becomes a major issue for students to take up these models and use them and substitute it for actual hard work. We'll figure out a way to prevent that. So there's tools like Turnitin and Grammarly and these kind of plagiarism checker tools. I would imagine, just like Shutterstock, they're going to go out and do a deal with OpenAI, and because that's all centralized, we'll be able to check these for accuracy, or for originality, or whether they're just copy pasting. I'd be more concerned if this was much more kind of open source, locally hosted, if all classrooms were online, and all essays were being submitted asynchronously. Then you would have a major problem on your hand. But I think because it's centralized, there's probably some mechanisms that can be put in place in the long term if it becomes an issue. But at the end of the day, this is an incredible tool that's being used to stretch our limits and our abilities. So, just like the calculator, right? It's really important that we learn how to wield this tool And to do that well, you've got to learn how the rules of grammar and conversational, and communication rules work. So there's a lot of ways that we can approach this. It's a tool that ultimately makes us better at what we do as humans. And when you bring it into the education space, it just has to be well managed so that we pick up the skills so that we can use the tool in a way that helps improve what we do.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think we got to really, we got a long way to go to understand exactly what the realm of possibility is. Martin, I'm going to go to you. Interesting piece. What are your thoughts?
Oh, definitely interesting. And some of the stuff that Mark mentioned definitely resonated when I was going through the article. And I think about it a little bit from a higher level. And I love the calculator example. I remember when I was in engineering school, I was 18, 19 years old, complaining to my professor what I needed to do that particular problem without my calculator, where I can push a button. And his response was like, well, you're learning how to build a calculator. This is engineering school. So I think, and the reason that I bring that up is that the context is very important, and it provokes a question, at least to me, where if there is a student that is in the pursuit of creative writing or truly trying to understand a language, it's not going to be in their interest to short circuit in any way the process of learning the craft. On the flip side, if there is a student that just wants to push a button, get an output and go on, so they can get a passing grade, that introduced to me the question of the significance of that course in the curriculum for whatever degree that person is pursuing. And then the bigger conversation, especially with the rising cost of education, higher ed, are we here to consume or are we here to produce as a student, right? And that's where a lot of my thinking went to. If my goal is to become the master of any domain, or at least attempt to become a master of a domain, and that domain involves creative writing, scientific writing, whatever the case might be, these could help tackle the blinking cursor 100%. But at the end of the day, that individual in their own pursuit wants to preserve their voice. They want to put forward their thoughts and create the inflection points within the discipline that they're pursuing, rather than having a generated output for it. The other concern one concern resonated or it was similar to what Mark mentioned, where, again, and this is a poetic oversimplification of the technology behind it, but as we're creating these models in consuming data from work of other people, and I apply that into an assignment in the context of school, how much of the voice of another person is the output going to mimic? I think there is still something, regardless of how communications have evolved, there is a big difference when you're going through online commentary and you see someone who has a well thought out idea, they were deductive in their thinking, they made a contribution to the conversation, and then the follow-up post is someone who goes, this, period. Was that a contribution? So that's where my mind went with regards to the preservation of someone's voice, and their contribution will always, in my opinion, and this is, I know, a blunt statement to say always, but that urge for us as people to put forward what we see, what we think, and what we want out of the situation should trump the generation of content in a programmatic way. That being said, I think it's a great tool for tackling the blinking cursor. The same way that when I have writers from a marketing perspective and I edit their work, I remind them, by the way, you tackle the empty page. That is probably the hardest thing to do, right? So it's all about the context. Great article, really took me on a trip, kind of like thinking about the value of education and how we think about tools. Final thought on this is to be overly concerned about not a fair path or using this to cheat in any way. I think that's probably missing the point. I think our tools and our technology will continue to evolve, and the way that we teach a subject and the way that we pursue passions and mastery will evolve accordingly. So I'm not that concerned about like, oh, they're using this to cheat. That provokes those kind of bigger thoughts that it took me down the road, if you will.
No, yeah, that's well presented. And Nikola, I'm going to go to you. So you've heard two interesting takes. I want to get yours. What'd you think?
I mean, this is interesting stuff. When you think about it, I kind of have two lines of thought, right? One is you think about what you're getting with this thing, and it's actually in an educational setting and like the development of us as human beings and as a civilization, it's really similar to Google, right? Where you're like, okay, if I can Google it, why am I learning anything, right? Well, to Google something effectively, you have to know what you're looking for. You need to know what the space of possible outcomes is. You need to be able to know how to ask the right question, right? Now, I think that, cheating wise, yeah, I agree. That completely misses the point. And it's not that relevant, right? You can, like, if you want to police against cheating in educational institutions, go ahead and do that. But that's like a minor point, right? But if you think about like the inequality between people who have had that foundational training that Martin talked about, right? Who've been taught how to like ask the question, how to like, work a problem and get to a solution. Like for them, this is just going to make them faster. It's not actually, in my opinion, going to make them meaningfully better. But, insofar as doing more work faster and then becoming better yourself, it could fast track it, right? If anyone has worked on, like, say, automated theorem proving, right? You've got like theorem provers that kind of like work in between like different steps and do the boring stuff that you could do, but why would you, right? You're just kind of like postulating a direction for the proof. Like stuff like that we've had in like, formal mathematics in terms of, just representing stuff with first order logic and whatnot. So this, in terms of writing then, has a bigger problem in my opinion. Because, like that, again, to be controversial, if you need this to start, then you don't really have an idea. So you're just mixing and matching different things that this model has seen. Now, if people use it to like actually augment their knowledge, the way that people use Google, now with Google, we know we're going to different web pages, we're kind of like looking at content and we know where it came from. We can kind of make a judgment over whether we should trust it or not and to what degree we should, right? If we train a lazy generation of people that use this to augment their work without critical thought, we're going to get to a point where people are just producing whatever this model has. And that comes back to like what I see as the fundamental limitation of the current wave of deep learning. And by the way, I'm a deep learning fanatic. My whole PhD is on that. But like we are just producing discriminative models that are not telling us the degree of confidence. And they don't have them, right? They're just producing a stream of thought that they've seen before in maybe some novel way, but not a creative way. So like, if you really want creativity, well, you should look to like the fundamental problem and you should just do that. So again, like, I don't think this is turning the world on its head. We've had language models for a very long time. They could produce a coherent, 4, 5, 6 words. Now they can do a bit more, but I think that like, again, those that are really good will become even better and will benefit those that are not as good less than those that are already really good. And that structure, like how you actually could think, like it costs like $10 million more to train one of these models, right? So they're trained on a snapshot of something. So if a key piece of information changes, something that any of us would understand in a heartbeat, right? These things are just still printing text, and the vote for what they are printing comes from what they've seen the most. So they're actually, we talk about biases, we talk about these things being unfair. They're not unfair, they're just statistical models. And they're learning from the unfair world that we have created, right? So if you want to create a better world, you need to find a way, and you want to do it in the field of statistical machine learning, you have to find a way to put in structure into these models, and the field is still lagging there. So if I were to go back to academia, that's probably what I'd focus on. Not that I think I could contribute meaningfully. This is obviously a very difficult problem.
No, that's great. That's a lot of insight there. And Shridhar, I'm going to give you the last word on this. Interesting piece. You've heard a lot of really interesting feedback on it. What's your take?
Yeah, totally agree with Nikola and others. I think there are two sides to the coin. One is, of course, writing in general, and what the tools can do. I think, in my view, I think the co-creation is the right word to use. And most of these tools today, I think we can augment our way of writing or expressing ourselves in certain applications that might be really, really good. And these are, they're versatile, cheap. If you want to really produce good quality text, decent quality text for marketing, collateral and stuff like that, SEO optimized articles, I think it's okay. But I think if you really want to look at, high quality writing, I think it comes from deep thinking and, research and lifelong reflections, experience, all that. And I think that is, that's not there in any of these tools anyway today, right? So I think that will still be the predominant domain of human endeavor. I think, and all those nuanced angles and perspectives sort of intermingling and bringing it all together. It's just a tool sort of augment your writing skill, or if you're really stuck at some point with a writer's block or something. I think these could actually dispel those things and then help you become more productive. I think so. That's my take. But especially when it comes to the education, I think probably these technologies would evolve to sort of teach children how to write, because they can write. And then, so what is this? How do you actually begin? How do you abstractize the ideas? How do you structure an article? All those things can be nicely taught with tools like this. And it can be a highly personalized experience for a student to learn, right? Instead of simply using it as a way of actually getting by in your homework, right? So that's what my take is. Yeah, so it is, again, it's a double-edged sword, and like in any other sphere, any technology has both the both these sort of points of view, and we have to figure out a way to sort of how do we co-create using these technologies to augment our skills, our training, our knowledge, and still retain what is uniquely human about ourselves.
I like that. No, I like that a lot, and I think all four answers were really insightful and paint a picture of how y'all are looking at this sort of development. I'll share one thing just to put a punctuation mark on it. It's not about this story. It's actually about 5 or 6 years ago, when one of the first, if not the first, educational story we covered on this show, one of the first I saw, was when this is when Alexa devices, the Echo, the Black Tower of Death, smart speaker generation 1, was selling off off the chain, and these things were starting to make their ways into classrooms. So what was discovered then was that speech pathologists who used these devices and brought them into their classroom or their educational space saw that children who had exposure to these devices and exposure to Alexa as a voice assistant had exponentially faster improvement in their speech deficiency. And as somebody, I've spoken about this several times, as somebody who grew up going to speech therapy in elementary school, I certainly pay attention to that, if not relate a lot to it. And no, that story is not the same as this one, but I think there's an interesting sort of connection between the two on, you drop technology in somewhere and you start to observe what happens, and you take the good with it, the rapid rate of improvement, the fact that children can talk to the technology, they're not being judged all the time. They're able to interact with it on their own pace. There's no human that's required. The dependencies are gone. But when it comes to all of the progress that you make and all of the, the gains that you realize, you want somebody to celebrate that with. Plus, you need a human sort of to keep you on track, lift you up too when you need to be lifted up. So, it really comes down to, Shridhar, what you sort of punctuated your statement with is, you need the best of both worlds. Not just with this, but with everything. So I like it. I wanted to include it, and I applaud Inside Higher Ed for continuing to watch this space. We've got just a couple of minutes left. I'm going to just read this out loud. I know we've got folks on this show that don't care at all about this, but as I have noted, ever since I started wearing the Tennessee Titans visor, the Titans have gone from 0-2 to now, after they destroy the Houston Texans this weekend, they will be 5-2. I'm going to read this from ABC6 in Philadelphia. Alexa predicts Phillies to win World Series. Houston, you're going to have a problem. Kudos to whoever on the payroll at Amazon wrote that. Any disagreement that the Phillies are about to win the World Series? And if there is, let me know and I'll mute you right now. Well, any quick thoughts on this humorous piece here?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it. I'll have been more impressive if forecasted how many innings that Mariners game was going to be. I will have been in better terms with my wife after I spent too many hours watching the games with the guys. But all kidding aside, one of the things that I took away from the story, right, is the medium. It's infotainment delivered through voice. And for me, that was even more interesting than the prediction in itself. It took me back to being a kid in Puerto Rico, listening to games over the radio and the whole theater of the mind type of thing. So again, it's another one of those palpable interpretations of what we can do with voice. The prediction is interesting. Again, my guys are off the race, so I don't have a dog in it anymore. If you want them to win, good for you, but I'm still recovering from the Mariners making it after 21 years and then disappearing. So I'll keep it.
We both are. Yeah, we talked about that for sure. Mark, you're an Aussie. You don't care about this.
Shridhar and I were talking before. We want to see Alexa's prediction on who's going to win the cricket T20 World Cup. What's going on?
Yeah, we'll get back to you on that. And Nikola, are you a baseball fan?
New York Mets. So yeah, not really.
All right. Got it. Yeah, and New York Mets were the one team that I wrote about for the Substack newsletter because of their you want to talk about sonic branding, the way that they brought in their closer with that song Narco. You know, they've got this whole orchestration around bringing in the closer. The ninth inning was really a phenomenal evolution of the sport almost, with how they did that. Gentlemen, thank you for the time. Thank you for taking the time to share your expertise and your experience with not just me, but the audience as well. It is certainly appreciated.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For this week in voice, for this week in voice, season 7, episode 7. Thank you for listening. If you're listening on your podcast provider of choice, thank you for watching. If you're with us on YouTube, until next time.